In the modern dating landscape, the phrase catching feelings has become synonymous with a high-stakes emotional gamble. For many men, the transition from a casual connection to a deep, undeniable emotional attachment feels less like a romantic fairy tale and more like a loss of strategic control. This internal shift often triggers a profound sense of vulnerability, leading to a psychological phenomenon where attraction and terror coexist. Understanding this fear of falling is essential for navigating the complex signals a man sends when his heart is racing toward a commitment that his mind isn't quite ready to sign off on. He isn't necessarily afraid of the person he is with. Rather, he is terrified of the version of himself that exists when he is in love, the version that is susceptible to hurt, compromise, and the unpredictable nature of another human being. The origin of this terror usually stems from a deep-seated desire for self-preservation. Men are often socialized to equate strength with emotional stoicism and independence. When a woman begins to occupy his thoughts at all hours, or when her opinion starts to carry more weight than his own, it feels like a breach of his personal fortress. This is why a man who is catching feelings rarely acts like the lead in a rom-com. Instead of grand gestures, he might display a confusing mix of hot and cold behavior, retreating into silence just when things seem to be going perfectly. This isn't a lack of interest. It is a defensive maneuver. He is attempting to reset his emotional compass and prove to himself that he is still the captain of his own ship, even as the tides of affection pull him closer to a shared shore. Decoding these signals requires a keen eye for nuance. A man who is terrified of his feelings will often betray himself through micro-behaviors, the way his eyes linger a second too, long before darting away, or how he remembers a tiny detail about your childhood, while simultaneously claiming he isn't looking for anything serious. These contradictions are the hallmarks of an internal war between his logic and his lizard brain. His logic tells him that staying unattached is safe, predictable, and easy. His heart, however, is responding to a chemical and emotional pull that defies his best-laid plans. This friction creates a unique set of behaviors that serve as both a cry for connection and a shield against it. Recognizing the 15 signs listed below isn't about fixing him or forcing a confession. It is about gaining clarity on the hidden dynamics at play. When a man is terrified by the depth of his feelings, he is essentially standing on the edge of a metaphorical cliff. He wants to jump into the unknown with you, but his instinct is telling him to check the parachute one last time. By identifying these patterns, from his sudden clumsiness to his unprovoked lectures on independence, you can better understand the silent struggle he is facing. This introduction serves as the roadmap for the emotional obstacle course he is currently running, providing a lens through which his most confusing actions finally begin to make sense. He is on the brink of surrender, and the terror you see is simply the shadow of the love he is starting to feel. He pulls away after moments of deep connection. When a man realizes his emotional walls are crumbling, his primary instinct is often self-preservation. This manifests as a push-pull dynamic. After an evening of intense vulnerability, or a breakthrough conversation, where you both felt incredibly close, he might suddenly go quiet for a few days. This isn't necessarily because he's lost interest. Rather, it's a defense mechanism triggered by the fear of how much power you now have over his emotions. To him, the closeness feels like losing control. By creating physical or digital distance, answering texts more slowly, or cancelling a casual plan, he is attempting to recalibrate and prove to himself that he is still independent. It is a psychological reset button. He is terrified that if he stays that close for too long, he won't be able to find his way back to his safe, solitary shell, making the silence a loud indicator of his internal struggle. His body language is a mix of open and guarded. Physical cues often betray the internal war between his heart and his head. You might notice him leaning in during a conversation, mirroring your movements and maintaining a warm, open posture that screams attraction. However, as soon as he becomes conscious of this intimacy, he may abruptly cross his arms, shift his body away, or create physical barriers like placing a drink or a phone between you. This inconsistency is a physical manifestation of his fight or flight response. He wants to be near you, but his subconscious is warning him to watch his front. You may also see him fidgeting with his clothes or touching his neck, classic signs of anxiety and discomfort. These micro-expressions reveal that while his spirit is drawn to your presence, his logic is frantically trying to maintain a protective boundary to keep his feelings under wraps. He remembers tiny, random details about you. Fear doesn't stop the brain from hyper-focusing on a person of interest. When a man is terrified of his feelings, he often becomes an unintentional historian of your life. He might bring up a specific brand of coffee you mentioned once 3 months ago, or remember the name of your childhood pet that you only brought up in passing. This level of detail-oriented listening is a major red flag for catching feelings because it shows that his mind is prioritizing information about you above everything else. For someone trying to stay detached, this is a nightmare realization. He might even seem annoyed with himself for remembering these things, or he'll deliver the information with a shrug, trying to play it off as a lucky guess. In reality, it proves that you have taken up permanent residence in his subconscious, regardless of how much he tries to deny it. The eye contact is intense, then suddenly broken. The eyes are the most difficult part of the body to lie with. You will often catch him looking at you with a gaze that feels heavy, soulful, and lingering. The kind of look that suggests he is truly seeing you. However, the moment you catch his eye or return the look with equal intensity, he will quickly dart his eyes away or look down at his feet. This sudden break in contact happens because eye contact creates a powerful chemical and emotional bond that he isn't ready to acknowledge. Prolonged staring feels like an admission of guilt to him. It's as if you can read his secret thoughts just by looking at his pupils. By looking away, he is trying to break the spell and regain his composure. This jittery visual behavior is a hallmark sign that he is overwhelmed by the depth of what he feels when he looks at you. He becomes clumsy or uncharacteristically nervous. A man who is usually suave, confident, or cool will suddenly lose his edge when he starts catching real feelings. If he begins tripping over his words, knocking over a glass, or losing his train of thought mid-sentence, it's because his nervous system is on high alert. Being around you has become a high-stakes environment for him. When it was just a casual fling or a friendship, there was no pressure. But now that he values your opinion of him, his performance anxiety kicks in. This clumsiness is an outward sign of an inner system overload. He is so busy trying to act like he doesn't care that he loses. The coordination required to act normal. His hands might shake slightly when he lights a candle or hands you a menu. These small tremors of nerves are clear indicators that his composure is being melted away by a brewing emotional storm. He checks in frequently without a clear reason. When a man is catching feelings but trying to fight them, he will often find himself reaching out just to hear from you. Even if he has nothing substantial to say, you might receive a text asking a random question about a movie or a simple, "How is your day?" which seems harmless on the surface. However, the frequency of these check-ins reveals his underlying obsession. He is trying to maintain a tether to you without admitting he craves your attention. This behavior often confuses him as much as it does you. He might even get frustrated with himself for picking up the phone again. To him, these messages are a way to satisfy the itch of missing you while still maintaining the facade of being casual. The lack of a specific agenda is the biggest giveaway. He just wants to stay in your orbit, but the terrified part of him ensures he keeps the topics light and superficial. To avoid a real conversation, he over-explains his need for independence. One of the most classic signs of a man in an internal panic is the sudden, unprovoked lecture on how much he loves his alone time or his freedom. If he goes out of his way to tell you that he's not looking for anything serious or that he really values his space, he is likely trying to convince himself more than you. This is a preemptive strike. He feels the gravitational pull of a relationship forming, and it scares him. So he reinforces his boundaries verbally to keep the feelings at bay. It's an overcompensation technique. He's building a verbal wall because the emotional one is starting to crumble. You may notice that these declarations often come right after a particularly romantic or intimate date. By loudly proclaiming his independence, he is attempting to regain a sense of autonomy and mask. The fact that he is becoming increasingly dependent on your presence and validation for his happiness. He subtly tests your loyalty or interest. When fear dominates a man's heart, he often looks for reasons to disqualify the relationship before it gets too deep. He may subtly test you by mentioning other plans he has or seeing how you react when he talks about his future. These aren't malicious games, but rather a defense mechanism driven by an intense fear of rejection. If he's terrified of his feelings, he's even more terrified that those feelings won't be reciprocated, or that you might eventually leave him. By throwing out small tests, he is trying to gauge if you are a safe place for his heart to land. He might play devil's advocate during a discussion or act slightly indifferent just to see if you will chase him or stand your ground. This stems from an imposter syndrome in the relationship. He can't believe something this good is happening. So he looks for the cracks in the foundation before he commits his entire heart to the structure. He introduces you to his inner circle, but acts cool about it. The inner circle introduction is a massive milestone that he will try to downplay with everything he has. He might invite you to a group hangout with his best friends or a casual family dinner, but he will frame it as no big deal or just a low-key thing. In reality, he is seeking external validation for the feelings he is too scared to admit to himself. He wants to see how you fit into his world and what the people he trusts think of you. If he's terrified, he might even act a bit distant, while you are with his friends to prove that he isn't whipped or overly attached. However, the very fact that he has allowed you into his private sanctuary speaks volumes. He is subconsciously building a bridge between your life and his, even while his conscious mind is screaming that he's moving too fast. His actions are integrating you into his life, while his words stay carefully neutral. His protective instincts start to surface. Even the most terrified man finds it difficult to suppress his natural protective instincts when he cares deeply for someone. You'll notice him walking on the street side of the sidewalk, checking to make sure you got home safely, or becoming visibly bothered if someone treats you poorly. This hero instinct is a biological response that bypasses his fear-driven logic. He might try to justify these actions as just being a gentleman or common courtesy, but the intensity and consistency of his concern reveal a deeper emotional investment. He feels a sense of responsibility for your well-being because you have become valuable to him. This creates a massive internal conflict for him. He wants to keep you at a distance to protect himself, but his heart demands that he stays close to protect you. This protective streak is often the first real crack in his terrified armor, showing that his feelings have already taken root. He stares when he thinks you aren't looking. The terrified man is a master of the stolen glance. When you are occupied with your phone, laughing with a friend, or simply looking out a window, he finds himself mesmerized by your presence. This is the only time he feels safe enough to let his guard down and truly admire you without the fear of being caught or forced to explain himself. In these quiet moments, his expression often shifts from his usual stoic mask to one of genuine tenderness or longing. However, the second you turn your head or catch his eye, he will snap back into an indifferent or distracted posture. This behavior shows that while he is trying to convince the world, and you, that he is unbothered, he is privately soaking in every detail of your existence. He is essentially window shopping for a future he's too scared to buy into yet, using these secret observations to process the depth of an attraction that he isn't ready to vocalize. He struggles to use we and us statements. Language is a powerful indicator of emotional commitment, and for a man fearing his feelings, we is a very heavy word. You might notice him going to great lengths to phrase things individually, saying things like, "I am going to that party, and you should come," instead of "we should go to that party." By avoiding plural pronouns, he is trying to maintain a psychological sense of separation and autonomy. Using we implies a unit, a partnership, and a shared future, all things that trigger his flight response. This verbal gymnastics is a conscious effort to keep the relationship in the casual zone, even if his actions suggest otherwise. When he accidentally slips up and uses we, he might even pause or look momentarily panicked. Realizing he has let a piece of his hidden reality slip through, he is terrified that by acknowledging the us, he is surrendering his identity to the relationship. He gets quiet when the conversation becomes emotional. When a conversation shifts from light-hearted banter to deep emotional territory, a man who is scared of his feelings will often shut down or become uncharacteristically quiet. This isn't because he doesn't have thoughts or feelings on the matter, but rather because he has too many and doesn't know how to filter them. He is terrified that if he starts talking, the truth about how much he cares will come pouring out. He might respond with one-word answers, change the subject to something analytical, or use humor to deflect the tension. This silence is his fortress. By refusing to engage in emotional depth, he thinks he is protecting himself from becoming even more entangled. It's a classic freeze response. He feels the weight of the moment and the potential for a breakthrough, and his instinct is to hold his breath until the danger of intimacy passes and the conversation returns to a safer, more superficial level. He shows up for you in small, practical ways. A man who is scared to say, "I love you," will often try to fix your life instead. He might offer to change the oil in your car, bring you soup when you're sick, or spend an hour helping you troubleshoot a tech issue. These practical acts of service are his way of expressing deep affection without having to use vulnerable language. For him, doing is much safer than feeling. He can justify these actions as being a good guy or just being helpful, allowing him to maintain his internal narrative that he isn't catching feelings. However, the reliability and thoughtfulness of these gestures tell a different story. He is investing his most valuable resource, his time, into your comfort and happiness. While he might be terrified of a romantic label, his consistent presence in your times of need proves that he has already integrated your well-being into his daily priorities, creating a foundation of care he can't easily ignore. He admits he's never felt this way before, then immediately pivots. The final and most telling sign of a man terrified by his feelings is the vulnerability slip. In a moment of extreme closeness, or perhaps after a glass of wine, he might let a profound confession slip out, such as admitting that no one has ever understood him like you do, or that his connection with you feels different. This is a rare glimpse into his true heart. However, because this admission is so high stakes, he will almost immediately pivot or retract it. He might follow up with a joke, start talking about something mundane, or even physically leave the room. This is the hangover of vulnerability. He realizes he has shown his cards, and he immediately regrets the exposure. This back and forth is the ultimate proof of his internal war. He knows he is falling, and he knows it's special. But the sheer scale of that realization is so frightening that he has to immediately hide behind his walls again.